Today, Democratic senators, state election officials, and voting rights advocates held a forum protecting the midterms, keeping them fair and free of interference from you-know-who, Donald Trump and his allies.
71% of election officials told us that they are preparing for scenarios of interference, whether that is post office changes or agents showing up to request access for ballots or voting machines. There are lawsuits ready to be filed by states' attorneys general, by civil society groups. The good news is this administration has telegraphed its plan. So this isn't going to be a surprise.
Joining us at the table, Democratic Senator Alex Padilla of California. He's the ranking member of the Rules Committee and helped organize today's forum. Welcome.
Look, the elections, I am concerned about them being free and fair, specifically because of what the U.S. Postal Service is doing. People may have forgotten, but the president signed an executive order in the spring, and his executive order basically said, among other things, that he believes mail-in ballots should not go to folks unless their states have turned over the voter rolls. Well, the U.S. Postal Service has now written a rule to adhere to this little executive order, and I'm concerned about the rule. I'm concerned that people.
Well, first off, can they do that?
Well, can they, Senator? That's a good yes, that's my question. Can they? Let me get a drink. Can they do that?
So the answer is no. Doesn't mean they can't try. That's obviously what they're doing. They're trying. So a couple of things. First, today's forum, it seems like an overwhelming kind of a morbid topic, right? All these attacks on our free and fair elections this November. Not that long ago, we were talking about redistricting fights. We've been talking about voter purges, now trying to access voter rolls and everybody's personal information. Now, elimination of vote by mail, which Donald Trump votes by mail, but he doesn't think it's good enough for the rest of us. And so we need the American public to know, hey, we're on it. We're pushing back, fighting back legislatively, legally, by any means necessary to protect people's access to the ballot. Now, I remember when I was Secretary of State, right, it's common practice to do what they call tabletop exercises. And let's game out a scenario. What if this were to happen? What if the power goes out in this neighborhood and the polling place is dark? What's your plan B? That seems pretty quaint nowadays. Yeah. Now elections officials are talking about, okay, what if armed federal agents show up at the polls? Or under some pretext and are intimidating voters. Now what do we do? So my advice to state and local colleagues is think of the craziest scenario you can imagine, and then think even crazier, because we've got to be prepared for anything. We will be prepared for anything.
We were talking earlier today, and there's this narrative out there that Democrats are leading in the polls, the wind is at their sails, there's a big blue wave coming, but there also are real measures being taken by the Trump administration to make free and fair elections harder to achieve. Robert Wright, who is a cabinet official in the Clinton administration, Cal Berkeley, he got a letter from former House Leader Dick Gephardt and Senator Tim Wirth. And I want to read part of what it says on the screen. And this is, quote, political prisons, a domestic army, control the military's legal apparatus, the seizure of voter rolls, and much more presage the potential declaration of a national crisis and the implementation of various of the president's emergency action documents. These are among the many individual actions and plans of the, quote, rolling coup, which is currently underway. There's a rolling coup already happening.
Well, there's an attempt at a rolling coup underway. But if you look at how we've been holding up in court, we've been doing pretty darn good. And it just, again, goes back to the envision every worst case or horrible case scenario you can imagine, and we have to have a plan in place. And so there's what senators can do, there's what attorneys general can do, that's what secretaries of state can do. I want to make sure we emphasize what voters can do, right? Because every state's a little bit different. Know your rules. What does it take to register to vote if you're not registered? And even if you are registered, it's a good idea to verify your registration status. Don't let them kick you off the rolls without you knowing, and then you wake up and it's too late to fix whatever the issue is or get back on the rolls. Make your plan for voting. Most people think, well, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November is Election Day. No, in most states, you have a vote-by-mail option or an in-person early voting option. Make your plan to vote early. Get your friends, get your neighbors, get your family members, get your coworkers to vote in advance so you don't have to worry about is ice at the polls on Election Day.
So, Senator, what the DNC and independent groups need to do is clip what just happened here at this table. It was a firsthand public service announcement to the American people, specifically about the power you still have to engage. But you have to be smart because you're dealing with people who are ruthless when it comes to your vote. And so I appreciate that. And I would encourage you to continue and your colleagues to continue to edify the American people on how our system works. Because I want to play for you what Bill Easley, who's the first assistant U.S. attorney for the Central District of California, had to say about rigged elections in your state.
We have various investigations at various stages. So some of them are more developed and they're ready to charge. Others are brand new and being worked up. And we are getting tips every day from the public of potential leads of new cases. I think what the president is saying is he's frustrated. And I think a lot of us were, as a former legislator in Sacramento, rigged doesn't necessarily have to mean illegal.
So I can't deal with that level of stupid. I would guarantee you they ain't got squat. They don't have squat. Put it on the table. Give me one. Just put one out there. Show us how the system in California, as it just played out in front of the American people, right? Mm-hmm. Even though none of us voted in California because we're not Californians, so why the hell do we care how you run your local elections? Because I'm worried about how they run mine in Maryland, right? But this administration wants you to believe that if California is rigged, everything else is rigged. And they're setting you up as an example to go after, as you just mentioned a little bit before, having federal troops showing up at election polling places. Talk a little bit about that and help us understand exactly what's wrong with what this president is doing about our vote and why California is a good example of how the system works.
Yeah, well, it starts with what you just said. If you have evidence, bring it. If you have proof, bring it. I've been asking that question since 2016 when Trump first ran for president, because if you'll recall...
You were trying to ask that question when they threw you on the floor.
Something like that.
Right?
But recall the 2016 election when he was still a candidate the first time, when asked in a debate. And he said, well, if I win, then I guess it's okay. But if I lose, then it must have been rigged. Right? He said in 2016, he said in 2020, he said in 2024, and he's saying it again to set the stage for when he doesn't get his way, he needs to find an excuse. It's a deflection, of course. And why is he targeting California? Because California don't like him. Right? There's things that Donald Trump does not like. Number one, dissent. He doesn't like people disagreeing with him and his agenda. Number two, he doesn't like accountability. Right? So when I was trying to ask a question, we saw what they did. That wasn't just a message to me. That was sending a message to the country. And certainly he doesn't like not getting his way at the ballot box, which is why he's trying to influence and interfere with this November's election while we're still in primary season.
Right.
But we leave, nothing to chance. We got to be ready.